Okay, so get this. What if the absolute strongest, most powerful move you could ever make is to do absolutely nothing at all? It sounds kind of crazy, right? But today, we're going to dive into this fascinating strategy of just ignoring a problem until it disappears. You know that feeling, right? We've all been there. You make some tiny little mistake and you immediately panic. You try to fix it, maybe cover it up, and suddenly, bam, you've just made it a million times worse. That little slip up is now this huge, embarrassing catastrophe. Well, that exact experience is really at the core of what we're exploring today. So this whole idea has a name, strategic disdain. And here's the principle. It's actually super simple. Your attention is a resource. It's like currency. It's power. And when you spend that attention on some petty problem or some minor irritation, you're actually giving it life. You're giving it credibility. You're literally making it stronger. The flip side? The less interest you show, the more powerful you seem. Okay, so to really see how this plays out, and maybe more importantly, how it can go horribly wrong, we're going to look at a pretty famous moment in history. It's like the perfect case study of what not to do. What happens when a global superpower gives way too much attention to what was essentially a minor annoyance. All right, so let's set the scene. The year is 1916. This guy, Pancho Villa, a famous Mexican rebel leader, decides to raid a small town in New Mexico. Now, back in Washington, President Woodrow Wilson is feeling the pressure. He needs to look tough. So what does he do? He sends this massive, punitive expedition down to Mexico to hunt Villa down. The plan was supposed to be a quick, decisive show of force, but yeah, it spiraled out of control fast. I mean, just picture the absurdity of this. On one side, you've got the United States of America, a global superpower. They've got the latest weaponry, they've got airplanes, radio, the whole shebang. And who are they chasing? A small band of rebels. It's like using a sledgehammer to swat a fly. By making such a huge deal out of it, the US accidentally turned this guy from just another bandit into a legendary opponent. And it just got bigger and bigger. That initial force of 10,000 soldiers, it ballooned to a staggering 123,000 men. Can you even imagine? This massive, slow-moving army just stumbling around the Mexican desert, chasing a guy who knew the land like the back of his hand. It was a total ghost hunt. And the more money and men Wilson poured into it, the more ridiculous the whole thing became. It got so ridiculous that Pancho Villa himself couldn't help but brag about it later. He basically said, "Hey, just think about it. Your government spent $130 million trying to catch me. And for what? As he put it, nothing was gained." He was basically rubbing it in their faces. So let's look at the final scorecard. The whole strategy was a complete disaster. Wilson's obsession didn't crush Villa, it made him a folk hero, more popular than ever. The US came off looking totally incompetent, and the original reason for the whole chase, pretty much forgotten. In the end, they just had to pack up and go home completely humiliated. A total, unmitigated failure. Okay, so that's what not to do. Now let's flip the script completely. We're gonna look at someone who was an absolute master of this game, someone who used disdain like a surgical weapon, none other than King Henry VIII. So here's Henry's problem. He is desperate, and I mean desperate, for a son to inherit the throne. To do that, he needs to get rid of his wife, Catherine of Aragon. The problem? The Pope, literally the most powerful religious leader in the Western world, is telling him no way. So this is a huge showdown, right? Henry versus an opponent who, on paper, has all the power. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of fighting the Pope head-on or trying to negotiate, Henry just pretends his power doesn't exist. It's incredible. First, he stops sleeping with Catherine, starts calling her Princess Dowager instead of Queen, a huge insult. Then he kicks her out of the court entirely. The Pope is furious, threatening excommunication, and Henry just ignores him. He goes ahead and marries Anne Boleyn anyway. And for the grand finale, he just says, "You know what? Fine, I'm starting my own church." It's an absolute masterclass in just completely ignoring authority. And this is the key takeaway. By simply ignoring them, Henry basically canceled them out. He just refused to play by their rules. And what could they do? They were left fuming, but they were totally powerless. You could say he won the fight by refusing to even get in the ring. All right, so we've seen a massive failure with Pancho Villa and a huge success with Henry VIII. So now let's get practical. Let's build a little toolkit. How can you actually apply this strategy, which, let's be real, can be kind of risky in your own life? Okay, we're going to look at 3 powerful tactics. First up, we've got the sour grapes approach. Then there's the light touch for when you mess up. And finally, the masterful confession for when you get caught in a lie. You probably know the first one, sour grapes, from the old fable about the fox and the grapes. The idea is simple. If there's something you really want but you just can't get it, the absolute worst thing you can do is complain. That just shows everyone you're weak and disappointed. The powerful move? Act like you never wanted it in the first place. Show contempt for it. Ah, those grapes were probably sour anyway. That's how you keep your power. Next up is the light touch. This is for when you're the one who messes up. There's this great story about a courtier in Japan who accidentally breaks the emperor's super valuable, priceless tea bowl. You'd expect him to panic, right? But he doesn't. He stays totally calm and just dismisses it, basically saying, it was an old thing, it was bound to break eventually. His total disdain for his own massive mistake was so powerful that it actually calmed the emperor down and saved him from some serious trouble. And last, we have the masterful confession. This is for when a secret or lie gets out. Check this out. A writer named Pietro Aretino had been pretending to be an aristocrat, but he was exposed as the son of a common shoemaker. Instead of denying it, he did something brilliant. He owned it. He basically said, yeah, that's right. And the fact that I rose so high from such a humble start just proves how great I really am. He completely reframed the truth and turned it into a source of strength. Genius. Okay, but now a really important warning. This is not a magic wand you can just wave at every problem. This strategy is more like a scalpel than a sledgehammer. You have to be smart about it, because if you ignore the wrong kind of problem, well, that can be a total catastrophe. So the whole game is learning to tell the difference between a nuisance and a real threat. Think of a nuisance as an annoying little gnat buzzing around your head. Yeah, it's irritating, but if you ignore it, it'll eventually go away. But a real threat? That's more like a cancer cell. It might seem small and insignificant at first, but if you ignore it, it's going to grow and fester and become a massive danger. And getting this wrong can be so dangerous. Take the princes in Renaissance Italy. They saw this up-and-coming young guy, Cesare Borgia, and they just dismissed him. They treated him with contempt, like he was nothing. They totally misjudged the situation. By the time they finally realized he was a threat, the little cub they ignored had grown into a ferocious lion, and it was way too late to do anything about it. Which really brings us to the heart of it. This quote from Baltasar Gracian just nails the incredible power of this strategy when you use it right. He said, "There is no revenge like oblivion." Think about that. The ultimate power move isn't to fight back. It's to treat someone or something as so completely insignificant that they just disappear, buried in the dust of their own nothingness. Wow. And that's really what this is all about. The power of strategic disdain is the power to choose where you invest your precious energy. So as we wrap this up, I'm going to leave you with a question to think about for yourself. What in your life, what petty annoyance, what minor drama, what distracting problem truly, truly deserves less of your attention?
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about something really fundamental to influence, and that is why what you see is so often way more powerful than what you hear. We're going to break down how these big, grand gestures and powerful symbols can literally shape what people believe, create entire legends, and move crowds, a lot of times, without anyone saying a single word.
All right, so let's just jump right in with this core idea. And this isn't about some simple little magic trick or deception. It's about understanding a deeper truth, that a really compelling visual spectacle can completely bypass our logical, rational minds. It just appeals directly to our emotions and to the one sense we trust above all others, our sight.
You know, when it comes to persuasion, words and images, they're not even playing the same sport. Words, they just invite argument, don't they? I mean, the second you start explaining yourself, you're already on the defensive. Your power starts to fade. But a picture, a powerful image, that hits you with this immediate emotional force. It doesn't ask you to debate. It just shows up, like it's a fact, like it's reality.
Okay, so to really see how this plays out, I want to take you on a little trip, back in time, back to Berlin in the 1780s. There was this mysterious doctor who was supposedly performing miracles, but he wasn't using medicine, he was using pure spectacle.
So yeah, that was the claim from a guy named Dr. Weisslieder. People started calling him the Moon Doctor. And check this out, his office? It wasn't some boring, sterile clinic, no way. He set up shop in this massive converted beer hall. So right from the get-go, the whole environment was designed to feel, well, mysterious and awe-inspiring.
I mean, just look at this scene. Every single piece of it was carefully crafted theater. You've got these long lines with everyone from the poorest people to the richest, all waiting together. That creates what we call social proof, That feeling that, hey, if all these people believe it, it must be true, right? Then you've got the moonlight, the dramatic stairway going up to the heavens, and you can hear people shouting that they've been cured. Your senses are just completely overwhelmed before you even see the doctor.
And the cure itself, the big moment everyone was waiting for, it was basically nothing, just a simple gesture. This was pure performance, and it was all relying on the power of a pre-existing symbol, the moon. For centuries, people have associated the moon with magic and fantasy and healing. He didn't need some complex machine or a logical explanation. The symbol did all the heavy lifting for him.
Okay, but here's the real kicker. This is where it gets crazy. It turns out his wife was curing people in another room, a room that was facing south, where it was physically impossible to see the moon. And guess what? Nobody even noticed. Why? Because the actual physical moon didn't matter one bit. Only the idea of it did. The symbol was so powerful, it just created its own reality, and the actual facts became totally irrelevant.
So that's a one-off spectacle, right? But what happens when you take this same principle and build it into a sophisticated, long-term strategy? Let's look at how one woman, Diane de Poitiers, used symbols not for just one night, but to build an aura of power that lasted for decades. So let me introduce you to Diane de Poitiers. She was King Henri II's mistress, and, get this, she was 20 years older than him. In her position, she was under this constant threat of being tossed aside for someone younger. So coming from a pretty modest background, she had to do something drastic. She engineered this whole visual identity to make herself seem, well, not just powerful, but almost divine.
So what did she do? She came up with this brilliant 4-step plan. This wasn't just a gimmick, it was a full-blown campaign to visually weld her identity to the king's and to lift herself up from just being a courtesan into a timeless icon.
Her big move? She linked herself to Diana, the Roman goddess of the hunt. And here's the genius part, the goddess of chastity. Think about that. She got her initial D intertwined with his H and put it everywhere. Her personal colors, black and white, suddenly became the royal colors. She turned her own castle into a temple for her goddess namesake. By just flooding the court with these images, she wasn't some aging mistress anymore. She was this mythic, untouchable figure.
Okay, so we've got the Moon Doctor and Diane de Poitiers. These aren't just cool stories from the past, you know? They actually show us these timeless principles about the psychology of visual power, about why our eyes so often have the final say over our minds.
The key to all of this, really, is the symbol. Think of a symbol as a kind of mental shortcut. It's like a zip file for the brain. It packs a whole universe of meaning and history and emotion into one single image that you get instantly. It just leaps right over that part of your brain that wants to argue and analyze, and it hits you right in the gut.
You have to remember, our brains are just hardwired to trust what we see. It's our primary sense. It's why we remember a face better than a name, right? It's a cognitive shortcut. An image just bypasses our instinct to question things and creates these powerful, immediate feelings. Think back to the Moon Doctor. His spectacle brought everyone together in this shared moment of belief. If he'd given a lecture on lunar energy, all he would have gotten was division and doubt. And you know who got this better than almost anyone? King Louis XIV, the Sun King. He didn't need to write a long book explaining why he was great. He just became the Sun King. That one single powerful symbol said it all. Radiance, centrality, the source of all life and power. It defined his entire reign, and he barely had to say a word.
So, what's the big takeaway here? It's this. I want you to start looking around. Think about the world you live in right now. From the sleek design of a phone that just screams innovation, to the carefully staged backdrop at a political rally, the power of spectacle and symbols is absolutely everywhere. And recognizing it, well, that's not about being cynical. It's the first real step to thinking clearly through all the noise.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into this really powerful, kind of timeless piece of advice. Think as you like, but behave like others. It's this fascinating strategy, right? It's all about how you can protect your most unique, your most original ideas, especially in a world that, let's be honest, doesn't always roll out the welcome mat for them. Okay, so let's kick things off with this incredibly sharp take from way back in the 17th century. The philosopher Balthasar Gracian said, "Truth is for the few, error is as usual as it is vulgar." Whoa. I mean, what he's really saying is that big, game-changing ideas, they're super rare. But common, everyday beliefs, well, they're often just flat out wrong. And right there, that sets up this huge social problem for anyone who dares to think differently. And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? This isn't just some abstract idea. It's a real-world challenge that, we all bump up against. It happens anytime our private thoughts don't quite line up with what everyone else expects. Because when you flaunt how different you are, it can make other people feel, well, insecure. And trust me, as we're about to see, they'll often find a way to make you pay for it. So to really get a grip on just how high the stakes are, we need a story. Let's dive into the cautionary tale of a guy named Pausanias. He was a brilliant Spartan general, but his arrogance, well, that's what ultimately did him in. Yeah, his story is basically a perfect guide on what not to do. It's this tragic, almost textbook example of how openly showing contempt for your own culture, no matter how smart or talented you are, can be a one-way ticket to your own destruction. And just look at how fast it all went down. It's stunning. In just a handful of years, he goes from this celebrated war hero to a public enemy, literally trapped and left to starve to death. And his big mistake? It wasn't just that he adopted foreign customs. No, it was the way he did it. He flaunted it, and his own people took it as a massive insult. It made them think the absolute worst of him. The historian Thucydides absolutely nailed it. He saw that the real problem wasn't that Pausanias was exploring a different culture. That wasn't it at all. It was that his actions screamed contempt for his own people. He wasn't just being different, he was basically making everyone around him feel small for sticking to their own traditions. And that's a dangerous game to play. Okay, so if that's the playbook for self-destruction, what's the alternative? How do you survive and maybe even thrive when you're holding on to ideas that are genuinely dangerous? Well, for that, we need to look at a true master of this game. And this comparison is just perfect. It lays out the two paths so clearly. On one side, you've got Pausanias, the rebel, right? He put his beliefs on full display and got crushed for it. But on the other side, Tommaso Campanella, the strategist. He disguised his true thoughts, wore a mask of conformity, and in the end, he walked away free. Think about who Campanella was up against. We're talking about the Inquisition, one of the most powerful and, frankly, terrifying institutions of its time. He was thrown in prison for decades for his heretical ideas and put through just unbelievable torture. So for him to survive, never mind keep working, he needed a strategy that was nothing short of genius. And his plan was just brilliant. It had these three incredible moves. First, he pretended to be insane to avoid being executed. Smart. Then, he did a complete 180 and went all in on public conformity. He actually wrote a whole book praising his captors. But the final move? That was the real masterpiece. He published a book that looked like it was defending the church, but hidden inside were the strongest arguments against it. He played the part, wore the mask, absolutely perfect. And Campanella wasn't the only one who figured this out. History's greatest strategists, guys like Machiavelli, they all got it. The whole point is to create this separation between how you act in public and what you truly think in private. Your mind becomes this protected fortress that no one else can touch. All right, so let's take this core idea and see how it actually becomes a practical strategy for survival, using tactics that are just as relevant today as they were hundreds of years ago. Take the Marranos in 15th century Spain. These people were masters of this. They were Jewish people who were forced to convert to Catholicism, but in secret, they kept practicing their own faith. They understood a crucial rule of society. What really matters for your survival is how things look on the outside, and they blended in perfectly. And hey, don't think this is just something from ancient history. Fast forward to the 20th century. You have Jonas Salk, the guy who created the polio vaccine. He went against the scientific establishment's rules, and they shunned him for it. Now compare that to the playwright Bertolt Brecht, when he was hauled in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee, which was basically a modern-day Inquisition. He didn't fight them. He played the part of this confused, harmless artist. He charmed them, and he walked right out the door, free to keep doing his work. So you see, it's not just about hiding what you believe. It's about actively, proactively blending in. The greatest leaders throughout history, think Julius Caesar, think Franklin D. Roosevelt, they were masters of this. They developed what we call the common touch. They used these little gestures and signals to show everybody that, hey, even though they were on top, they still share the same values as everyone else. So, let's bring it back to us. What does all this mean for us, right now? What's the big takeaway when it comes to protecting our own unique, unconventional ideas? Well, there's this piece of ancient wisdom that just cuts right to the heart of it all. Your original ideas, they're like pearls. They're valuable, they're precious. But if you go throwing them to people who can't appreciate them, It's not just a waste. It's actually dangerous. Because people can feel threatened by things they don't understand, and they might just turn on you. The metaphor of the black sheep is just so powerful, right? The black sheep is the one that stands out, it gets isolated from the herd, and that makes it a super easy target for wolves. The goal here isn't to change who you are on the inside. It's not about becoming a white sheep in your head. It's about wearing the white fleece as camouflage, as protection. You stay with the herd because there's safety in numbers, all while keeping that inner freedom, that black sheep mind, completely untouched. And that really brings us to the final and maybe the most important question. This whole strategy, it's not about being a mindless drone, just conforming for the sake of it. No, it's about being a smart conformist. The real art, the true genius, is in the timing. It's knowing when to put on that white fleece to stay safe, but also knowing when, and maybe more importantly, with whom, you can safely show your true colors. So the real challenge isn't just hiding your ideas forever. It's about knowing the right moment for them to finally see the light of day. You ever see someone just lose it at the absolute worst possible moment? Well, it turns out that's not just a personality flaw, it's a massive strategic weakness. Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful principle, using your opponent's emotions against them while making sure you always keep your own in check. Okay, so let's get right into it. The main idea here is pretty simple on the surface. You have to stay calm and objective. Always. But here's the twist, and this is where it gets good. If you can make your enemies angry while you stay cool as a cucumber, man, you gain a huge advantage. You can knock them off balance, find all the little cracks in their ego, and, well, you're basically pulling their strings. To really see just how devastating it is to lose emotional control, we're going to turn to one of history's absolute giants, Napoleon Bonaparte. And we're going to look at a single moment that, as one man there put it, was the beginning of the end. I want you to just picture this scene. It's Paris, January 1809. Napoleon is rushing back from his campaigns in Spain, and he is not happy. He's agitated, he's anxious, because he's hearing these rumors that two of his most important ministers might be conspiring against him. So what does he do? He immediately summons all his ministers to the palace, and as they file in, he just storms into the room and starts pacing back and forth, just rambling on about plotters and traitors and how he's being undermined. The stage is definitely set for a major confrontation. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Just look at the contrast here. You've got Napoleon working himself up into a full-blown frenzy. He's screaming, he's stamping his feet, his face is getting all red, his eyes are practically bulging. And what is his foreign minister Talleyrand doing this whole time? Absolutely nothing. He's just calmly leaning against the mantelpiece, looking totally indifferent, maybe even a little bit bored. And of course, this complete lack of reaction just makes Napoleon even more furious. And then Napoleon just explodes. He unleashes this torrent of insults, calling Talleyrand a coward, a traitor, a man who would sell his own father. And it all builds up to this one incredibly nasty line. Just think about it. The great conqueror of Europe screaming like a spoiled child. And this, right here, this is the masterstroke. This is the power of a calm response. After Napoleon is totally finished, completely out of breath and spent, Talleyrand just slowly limps across the room. An attendant helps him with his cloak, and he turns to the other ministers, who are totally terrified, by the way, and he delivers this devastatingly cool line. In one sentence, he didn't just fight back. He completely humiliated the emperor, simply by refusing to get angry. So what was the real damage here? Well, it was huge. The story of the emperor's little meltdown spread like wildfire, and for the very first time, people saw the great Napoleon, the man of iron will, totally lose his cool under pressure. A crack had just appeared in his invincible image, and it was a sign that his power was starting to fade. Okay, so that's a perfect example of how not to do it. Now, let's flip the script and look at an absolute masterclass in emotional strategy from a man who used this exact principle to become an emperor himself, Haile Selassie of Ethiopia. So, by the late 1920s, Selassie is the regent, he's the heir to the throne, but there's a problem. He knows that this powerful warlord, Ras Gugsa, and his wife, the empress, are plotting against him. Now, he can't just attack them outright, that would be too messy. He needed a much smarter plan. He needed to force Gugsa to make a move before he was really ready. And what a plan it was. I mean, just look at these 4 steps. It's beautiful. First, Selassie goaded him. He ordered Gugsa to go fight a tribe that he actually respected, which was a huge insult to his pride. And just like Selassie predicted, Guxa reacted emotionally. He got furious and declared a holy war. But, and here's the genius part, Selassie had already set the trap. Long before this, he had isolated Guxa by bribing his allies and getting the church on his side. So as Guxa's army is marching, airplanes fly overhead and drop thousands of leaflets announcing that he's been excommunicated. His holy war was over before it even started. And let's be clear, this was no small threat Guxa posed. He had raised an army of 35,000 men. That is a massive force. But by stirring the waters, by baiting that emotional response, Selassie completely neutralized that threat with almost zero fighting. Guxa's army just vanished. The result? Total victory. Ras Guxa ended up getting killed in a small skirmish, and the Empress died just a few days later. Selassie had played his opponent like a fiddle, and the path to the throne was now wide open. It's just a perfect example of a cool, calculated mind triumphing over a hot, emotional one.
So we've seen a spectacular failure and a brilliant success. Now let's actually break down the core mechanics of this whole thing so you can really understand how to make it work.
The first thing you have to get in your head is this idea of petulance, a childish, angry outburst. It is not a sign of power. It's the exact opposite. It's a flashing red light that signals helplessness. It shows everyone that you've lost control of the situation and you're just resorting to a tantrum. Truly powerful people never, ever show that kind of weakness. So how do you master this? First, you've got to adopt the mindset that in the game of power, nothing is ever really personal. When you see someone having an emotional outburst, don't take it as a personal attack. See it for what it is, a disguised and usually clumsy power move. Your one goal is to keep your head while they're losing theirs. Remember, anger just slams doors, it cuts off your options. But by staying calm, you open up this whole new playground where you can play with their emotional responses. And as we saw with Talleyrand, sometimes the most infuriating and most powerful response of all is just calm, cool indifference. And look, this isn't some new age self-help idea. The master strategist Sun Tzu was writing about this over 2,000 years ago. The greatest leaders, the greatest strategists in history have always understood this one simple truth. Decisions made in anger are almost always the wrong ones. But, and this is a really big but, before you go out and start provoking everyone just to see what happens, there's a critical warning that comes with this strategy. Stirring the waters is incredibly powerful, but you have to be so careful about whose waters you decide to stir. For this, let's look at the cautionary tale of the ancient city of Tyre. They felt totally secure on their little island fortress, and they decided to provoke Alexander the Great by refusing to let him enter. Okay, this made him furious, and he started a long, difficult siege. But the Tyrians, feeling confident, then decided to escalate. They killed his messengers. This pushed Alexander right over the edge. He marshaled every resource he had, conquered the city, burned it to the ground, and sold every last citizen into slavery. The lesson here is crystal clear, right? The leaders of Tyre were actually successful. They stirred the waters and got a massive emotional reaction from the most powerful and ruthless conqueror on the planet. They completely failed to understand who they were dealing with. You have absolutely everything to lose by provoking an enemy you cannot possibly beat. And that really brings us to the final question you've got to ask yourself. This whole strategy is about baiting the fish into making a mistake so you can catch them. But you must never, ever try to stir up the sharks. So as you go about your own life, it's really worth thinking about, in your world, who are the fish and who are the sharks? All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a really powerful and honestly a pretty counterintuitive idea today, and it's this. The most expensive things in your life might just be the ones you get for free. Yeah, I know, it goes against pretty much everything we're ever taught, but stick with me, as you're about to see what looks like a gift can end up hiding a seriously steep price. I mean, this quote just gets straight to the point, doesn't it? What is offered for free is dangerous. Powerful people throughout history, they get this. They understand it deep down. Everything has a cost. And when you pay your own way, you stay clear of all that baggage, gratitude, guilt, any kind of funny business. That free lunch we hear about, it's not just a myth. It's a trap waiting to be sprung. And look, it's a totally fair question. Why would anyone believe that? It sounds kind of cynical, right? But here's the thing. This isn't about being a pessimist. It's about being strategic. And before we really get into the nuts and bolts of how this works, let's look at a huge real-world disaster that shows exactly what happens when that temptation, that lure of getting something for nothing, turns into a full-blown obsession. Okay, so we're heading back in time, way back, to the 16th century, the Spanish Empire, and the absolute obsession with finding El Dorado, the legendary city of gold. I mean, this is it. This is the ultimate story of chasing a free jackpot and paying a price you just can't imagine. So just look at how this thing spirals out of control. It starts in 1541. Gonzalo Pizarro, he leads this massive expedition. We're talking thousands of men, supplies, the whole 9 yards, into the jungle, all looking for the city of gold. But the dream of easy riches, it turns into a total nightmare fast. The rain just never stops, their gear rots, food's gone, so they get desperate. They start torturing locals for information, and they follow these false leads deeper and deeper and deeper into the jungle, basically marching in circles. And then, get this, after a year and a half of pure hell, a few emaciated survivors, barely human, stumble back. They found absolutely nothing. And here's the true cost, the real punchline to this whole tragedy. It wasn't just about the money they dumped into these failed trips. No, the obsession with El Dorado cost thousands upon thousands of lives. And it had this devastating ripple effect on Spain itself. The country was practically emptied of its young men, all chasing gold. Farms went to ruin. And the empire, it started a downward spiral it never truly pulled out of. All of that for the promise of a free lunch. Okay, so that's the cautionary tale on a grand imperial scale. But the crazy thing is, the exact same psychological traps that brought down an empire, well, they can show up in our own lives, right now, through these really destructive ways of thinking about money. So as we dive into these, have an honest look. Maybe you'll see these patterns in people you know. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll see a little bit of yourself. And hey, this isn't about judging anyone. It's just about recognizing what's going on. Because once you can see these traps, that's the first step to making sure you don't fall into them. All right, let's break down these 4 money traps. First up, you've got the greedy fish. This person is cold, ruthless. They see everyone else as just pawns on their chessboard. And the result? They alienate everyone and end up totally alone. Then there's the bargain demon. We all know one of these. They are obsessed with price. They'll waste hours, days just to save a few bucks on something cheap that probably breaks anyway. What they really lose is their time, their dignity, and their sanity. Next is the sadist. This person uses money like a weapon. They'll drag out payments, haggle over every little thing, just to torture people and feel powerful. It just poisons every relationship they have. And finally, there's the indiscriminate giver. They give to everyone, all the time, not because they're truly generous, but because they desperately want to be liked. Their gifts just end up feeling, well, kind of cheap and needy. You see the pattern here, right? Every single one is trapped by a rigid, self-defeating view of money. So, okay, if those are the traps, what's the way out? What's the alternative? Well, it's not about being a miser and hoarding every penny. And it's definitely not about being cheap. The most powerful mindset is actually the complete opposite. It's all about understanding the strategic power of being generous. And I absolutely love this way of thinking about it. You've got the miser's mindset on one hand. They see money as like a stagnant pond. It just sits there, it gets gross, and nothing good can grow in it. But then you have the power player's mindset. They see money as a flowing river. It has to keep moving, it has to circulate, to create wealth, to build influence, to generate even more power. See the difference? The goal isn't just to have money, it's to use it. And that brings us to this really key idea, strategic generosity. Now, this is not about just throwing money around randomly, like that indiscriminate giver we talked about. No, this is about the art of circulating your resources. You're not just buying stuff. You're building alliances, you're creating connections, and at the end of the day, you're buying yourself independence and freedom. And if you want a masterclass in how this works, you've got to hear about this guy from the Italian Renaissance, a writer named Pietro Artino. Now, this guy was the son of a shoemaker, okay? But he used strategic generosity so brilliantly that he became one of the most powerful and influential people of his entire era. So how do you do it? Check out his 4-step playbook. It's genius. Step 1, he acted the part. He spent money lavishly to create this image of being a big shot. Step 2, he built a reputation for being incredibly generous with everyone, from the rich to the poor. Step 3, and this is the killer move. He gave these incredible, thoughtful gifts to powerful people. But here's the twist. He gave them as an equal, not as some suck-up. And that simple act completely flipped the script. All of a sudden, these powerful patrons felt like they owed him. And what was the result of all this? True power. Aretino had tons of patrons, which meant he was never dependent on any single one of them. You see what he did? He turned money into independence. He beat the most powerful people at their own game by simply refusing to act like he was beneath them. Okay, so what's the big takeaway here? Let's boil all of this down from the disaster of El Dorado to the genius of Aretino into a clear new way to think about money. So here are the key lessons. First off, pay the full price. Don't cheap out. Excellence costs money, and paying for it is what keeps you free from obligation. Second, change how you see money. It's not just for buying things. It's a tool for building influence. Third, always be suspicious of the free lunch. Understand that there are probably hidden costs you're not seeing. And finally, use generosity as a tool. Think of it as both a sign that you have power and a magnet to draw even more of it to you. You know, it's funny. Aesop nailed this thousands of years ago. The worth of money is not in its possession, but in its use. Just having money, hoarding it, burying it in the ground, that does nothing. Its real value, its actual power, only gets unlocked when you put it out into the world and make it work for you. So, I'm going to leave you with this one question to really chew on. Think about your own life. What's something that seems free? Maybe it's a favor from a colleague, a free app on your phone, or even just an opinion you got for free. What seems like a total gift, but might actually be costing you way more than you think.